like people watching you,
What is your opinion about what's going on here with the homelessness and stuff? What's that?
I said I don't really have too much to say.
Oh,
I got it.
nice.
Now the police know we're making a film. Good job, Osa.
Rio Grande, what you knew about the shelter area is no longer. The world has changed. And so those that actually maybe were resistant before, we're hoping that they'll be more susceptible or more accepting of accessing services now that it's a safe environment. Our partner agency.
If we have information that you're selling narcotics here, you bring it into this area, then we're going to proactively seek you out and we will arrest you. So when Operation Rio Grande started, we understood that many of the criminal actors that were down here in the Rio Grande district would actually disperse. We've already served search warrants throughout the state, and we're going to continue to chase the problem. If we find that there's an organization that's impacting Operation Rio Grande in St. George, we will go to St. George. It's hard law enforcement work to measure success, but we know that we walk around Rio Grande and you feel safe. You feel like you can visit these restaurants, that you can walk around by yourself without being victimized.
Walk around by yourself without being victimized.
Rosie, tell us about yourself. You know, your story. Let's go back. Let's go far back. When you were young.
I'm Rosie. I'm 17. I started living at the shelter about 11 or 12. I was homeless a long time before that, and I dealt with a lot of struggle and strife throughout my life. And I had something happen in my life that made me have to become homeless. And when I went there the first time, actually walking down the street of the homeless shelter, I was scared and I was sad, and I thought that like I wouldn't want to be there and I would want a home and stuff. But like throughout living there,
how old were you at that time?
I remember 12, but I think I was there before that, and I lived at the shelter twice. Right here is the Wickham Center. I remember coming here with my family. This is where the homeless come and get IDs and stuff that they need, or help get them in housing, pretty much, and help them get homes, just like the shelter did. But the shelter sent you here, and this building is where people used to eat. Maybe they still do this. Sometimes it wasn't all that good, but sorry, sir. It was still something to eat when my parents couldn't afford it, from like buying microwavables to cooking the microwave every day. But this is the shelter. Crazy, because in the far back right there towards the middle was the kitchen. That was the upper floor. And right here was a corner that used to be a window right here where you could look out right here to the crossing of the road. And this door led up the stairs to the dorm, like from right here.
Wow.
I was watching the news, and I first saw the rubble like over the news. It like broke my heart. I was crying, and I was talking to my best friend about all the experiences I had. Like my first girlfriend was in this place. My first like a lot of things were in this place. Like that were just besides that. Like just me being homeless there, I met a lot of people. When I was 12 years old, I carried this kid that his mom was, I don't know, she just made me babysit him a lot and like kids actually weren't supposed to babysit at the shelter, but I just babysat him a lot and carried him around, sleeping in my arms, and like I just felt this connection with this little boy, and like I felt like I called him my son. Like I started taking Spanish for 3 years, just so I could learn how to like teach him how to speak the English, like be able to speak to him in Spanish. A lot of things, memories come to mind. My first time walking down the street, there's dozens of people who were maybe addicted to drugs or struggling with issues, or maybe they became homeless and got addicted to drugs. I don't know what ended them up here. Some people ended up here with a lot of different ways, and everybody had sad stories, but it's crazy. It's the first time I've been able to walk down the street since Operation Rio Grande.
State Bureau of Investigation agents have been dedicated to breaking up the vast drug networks that have plagued the Rio Grande area. The troubled region of downtown is home to many vital resources for homeless and at-risk members of our community, which is why operation leaders view this objective as an essential key to Operation Rio Grande.
The role of SBI is to actually follow those people who are committing crimes, who are victimizing the homeless, who are violent, who are maybe involved in gang activity, who are trafficking narcotics. We are proactively targeting those individuals and looking to take them into custody.
Proactively targeting those individuals and looking to take them into custody.
But who's really being arrested?
There are, some users that are being arrested because they're committing crimes, but that's not our target. We're targeting those individuals who are selling narcotics, and we're going to be very aggressive in looking for those individuals.
Salt Lake City,
you know what you can do.
the number of chronically homeless, defined as those on the street for more than a year straight or 4 or more times in the last 3 years, has dropped from nearly 2,000 to less than 180, generating headlines, praise, and interest from across the country.
Doing differently here in Salt Lake City. Where are they succeeding that Portland is failing?
I think part of it is we just stuck to it. This isn't a sprint, this is a marathon.
When Utah rolled out its initiative called Housing First in 2004, city, county, and state agencies all bought in and stayed in.
In some areas they would try it and say, hey, it didn't work. Well, this doesn't work the first time, it doesn't work the second time. You have to perfect it, but you have to be committed to it and keep doing it.
This isn't a sprint, this is a marathon.
Lack of cohesion between agencies created a noticeably different outcome. While camps of cardboard, tents, and tarps are popping up here like mushrooms in a rainforest, it's visibly different in downtown Salt Lake City, where you're hard-pressed to find blatant displays of illegal camping.
A few moments later.
And Salt Lake County is putting the homeless on notice this morning. They're cleaning up homeless camps in downtown Salt Lake. The county says they're focusing on cleaning the area near 3rd East and 2nd South. ABC4's Jared Giaccinini is there live in Salt Lake City. So Jared, why is the county doing this cleanup?
Cleanup just wrapped up here, Brian, a couple hours ago, and throughout downtown, signs like this have been posted by Salt Lake County Health Department telling campers, homeless people, they needed to be cleared out by 9 a.m. this morning, and all their belongings left behind will be destroyed. Now the county says, here's video of the enforcement. The county says, along with local law enforcement, they're out enforcing the camping ban. It's all part of a weekly community cleanup effort. Utah code prohibits camping on private or public property that is not licensed or zoned for it. The group Civil Riot was here for the sweep to help homeless people gather up their belongings and to speak out against the camping ban. The group says folks who sleep out here have no place else to go, saying since the road home closed last month, the new resource centers are at capacity. And we've been out here all morning watching folks waking up, scrambling to pack up and move on.
the different types of predatorial activities, which isn't just in drug trafficking, but it's also in property management. We talk about dignity of employment, but what about dignity of tenancy? You know, we are a landlord pro state. You know, we put profits before we put people. You know, we value luxury properties and condominiums over the people that are stuck outside freezing to death because they couldn't pass a credit check. You know, like, but what are we doing on that end with Operation Rio Grande? Nothing. It's drugs, 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 but it's never about rent inflation. It's never about wage stagnation. It's never about proper Medicaid expansion. My mother is a nurse and my sister is a pharmacy tech. They know this just as much as I do. Sure. You know, and it's all right there. But as long as we can focus on the front end of this argument, law enforcement, shock and awe, we're forgetting that in this whole area, we're looking things as black and white in a sea of gray. Then when we go back to closing shelters for less beds, but hey, we're going to offer these emergency housing options, which we still applaud. I don't care. I believe in the Rumi quote. I'll enjoy the wine regardless of the cup it's poured from, as long as it gets my people housing. But let's not forget that poverty and homelessness is not a generational event. It's a sociological cycle. So if we narrow all this population down to bed, right? So when these 3 new shelters open and they close the road home for 2 weeks, there's no one left out. And a month later, those 200 people you gave housing to will be replaced by 300 because we have not dealt with the systemic issue.
As the crackdown continues on the drug market among some of the homeless, neighboring businesses say it's simply not enough.
But a longtime restaurant owner tells me this effort is too little, too late.
I can't tell you how many hundreds of wonderful people that have worked for me and literally millions that have enjoyed meals here.
After 35 years in business, Rio Grande cafe owner Pete Henderson says folks now leave talking about something besides the food.
They don't feel safe here any longer.
Next door is the Road Home Shelter, with the homeless population spilling over to the entrance of his cafe, prompting many variations of the same customer complaint.
I won't come there with my wife. I won't go there after dark. I won't go there with my children. And you know what? I don't blame them. This is not a safe neighborhood any longer.
Police don't usually know where the road will lead them.
Where's everybody going? I'm over here with Ronnie and Mark off of 300 North, 900 West. Do you have something?
On the streets of Salt Lake City's west side, these cops already have a pretty good idea.
We watched the guy do like a hand-to-hand with a guy walking through the parking lot, and then he came back and got back in his car.
Oh, okay.
He was in there for like 15 seconds, and got back out.
It isn't that anything can't happen.
Spit it out! Spit it out! Hey, spit it out.
Spit it out right now.
A traffic stop can go from 0 to 100
He can't swallow right now.
in a hurry.
Spit it out!
Spit it out.
It's not worth it, man. Spit it out.
Spit it out! You'll die if you swallow it.
But even in this situation,
All the way, dude. You have a plastic bag in your mouth.
Spit it out.
Come on.
There you go.
agents of the Rio Grande Task Force
Put your other hand behind your back.
never lose their sense of direction.
Where's everybody going? The yellow packaging, it appears to be cracked. Luckily, he wasn't able to swallow those substances, and we were able to get it before he digested it.
The task force is turning traffic stops like these into drug investigations.
Basically, the concept behind it was a proactive group that was going to be dealing with the individuals who were trafficking narcotics and preying on the population down there in the Rio Grande area.
Formed by the Utah Department of Public Safety, State Bureau of Investigation, soon after Operation Rio Grande launched in 2017. The full-time 11-member task force has helped to make nearly 700 arrests.
These are packaged for distribution. That's all heroin.
Busting over 500 suspected drug dealers.
Got quite a bit in there.
In the process, the unit has taken more than 58 pounds of meth and 17 pounds of heroin off the streets. Agents will often start by simply observing, identifying the neighborhood's key players.
Who's the dealer? Who's buying? You'd be amazed what they'll still do.
They then follow the leads wherever they go, sometimes far outside of city limits.
These drug dealers often will live in other communities. They'll come down, they'll sell their narcotics downtown, and then they'll go back to where they're going. So that task force can move to where the problem is, and we can address it.
The numbers show the drug problem in Rio Grande is being addressed. In 2017, Salt Lake City police recorded over 8,000 drug abuse-related offenses there. Since that time, the numbers have dipped sharply, and the department says the task force's suppression ops have been a welcome part of the equation. But the road these cops are on isn't just
another day of work only goes one way. Going off the information that we get that's on the street and following that information to where it leads us until it stops.
But the road these cops are on.
Operation Rio Grande launched on August 14, 2017, with the goal of restoring public safety and order. Opinions about the success of the program vary, depending on who you talk to.
I knew that simply arresting and jailing individuals during Operation Rio Grande meant worse jail overcrowding and meant recycling people with a serious addiction back onto the streets and soon back into the jail and criminal justice system.
But in surrounding areas like Fair Park, residents say they still feel like problems of drug and crime have just been pushed their way.
Doing nothing wrong. I'm not anyway. I'm just trying to find somewhere to sleep.
After her fiance left, the Salt Lake City native has been cited for camping on public grounds 10 times in 1 year.
Make my bed, get warm, and try to sleep, and here they come. And they wait till after midnight when it's really cold. When it's starting to get really cold, that's when they move us.
The impacts on people experiencing homelessness and others in the Rio Grande area was pretty severe.
Operation Diversion that started last week and has already resulted in dozens of arrests and offers for immediate drug treatment.
For immediate drug treatment.
Here would be the doorway. And then the men's side was, and the women's side was right here. And the family side that I was staying in was right here. And the office was right through the family side door.
So were you homeless pre-Rio Grande?
Yeah.
It was so hot in this area, like...
It was so bad down here. You would get a jaywalking ticket. If you didn't walk to that sign right there and cross the street, you get a jaywalking ticket because the cops wanted every excuse to take someone and pull them over because how many people were slanging drugs on this road or just doing it. Or like just because there's families living here. At that time they wanted to bust down, but they were not as bad as Operation Rio Grande. When this was happening, somebody could shoot someone and the cops would show up a couple minutes later. It was nothing like when they started the Operation Rio Grande. I was living here when stuff was really, really, really bad.
Yeah, when it was just pretty rampant. It was pretty much just a free-for-all.
Yeah, I remember meeting when I was 12, I remember meeting a dude who was in college. He was in college at one point. He had a really good life. He had a lot of money at one point in his life. And I met a dude on the street and he was really messed up off of the drugs, but I was a 12-year-old kid and I made friends with the freaking drug addict. And I was talking to him and like I would come outside with handfuls of chips and hand it to him because like I would get food in the shelter. There was like family dinner nights at the shelter and like teens nights out where they would take us up to the university to do things. There was actually a lot of people who would actually come down to this road and give out to people. Like throughout the winters, there was somebody who bought out the Nike store and brought a huge truck full of shoes and gave them out to all the kids. Families always got first.
I just couldn't do it here. I went and slept at Memory Grove Park.
Yeah, definitely. I spent a lot of time, and everybody that I was friends with growing up spent a lot of time at the library too, the downtown library. We all spent a lot of time at there too.
Yeah, because you could just get
I called that throughout growing up my second. I called that downtown library my second. Because when I was a bad kid because like sometimes things in my life made me not want to go to school, and I would like love school and I would go to the library with my friends and just sit there because it's the warmest place to be. Or like and when I was staying in the dorms, which was there was 2 floors on this building, and that actually is the roof to the dorm. That metal piece right there was hanging off the ceiling. Like I remember my bed was like right above it. I could almost hang something there, but if I did, I would get in trouble. But that was like hanging right over my bed, and that's how the upper room was in the dorm. But when I was staying in the dorm, I'm with so many people crying, babies, people screaming throughout the night. Sometimes you would get no rest because there's people talking all night. Like there's a certain hour that the staff, what they called them here, would go and check if people were in their bunks.
Experiences with people trying to take advantage of you or stealing things while you were here?
Well, yeah, I could get into this. I had a friend when I was 12. I'm not gonna say his name, but his mom. I was a bad kid, and at school I got made fun of because I had holes in my shoes or like dirty clothes, or like pretty much when I came here, I like wore clothes that I didn't even like, or holes in my shoes, and like all this other stuff. But I would go to that mall right there. I kind of messed up, but I would shoplift. I got caught for it, and I changed my ways because that's not my way of living anymore. But
So do you feel like that was the pinnacle point for you?
yeah, and
Going to jail?
But my friend Chris's mom took advantage of me by saying that she was gonna blackmail me and tell my mom and tell his story if I wouldn't keep stealing for her and her son and myself. And so she blackmailed me into stealing for her every day, and like I was too young to like realize or say no, and it was crazy. And like when I was 12 years old, my best friend was an 18-year-old named Chrissy, and she had a baby named Troy, and it was her first time ever being homeless. And I was younger, and I like showed her like the ropes, and she was confused, but I was like been here for a while longer, so I was able to show her stuff. And like it was crazy that my best friend was 18 years old and I was 12 with a she's grown as fuck with a baby, you know what I mean? And like I was able to, like, that's how mature the streets made me, you know what I mean? And like it's crazy that like the streets did a lot to me, and like not even just here but prior to this, but this did a lot, like huge. But I was like 12, I believe. Maybe the first time I was living there, 11 and 12, probably throughout both of those ages. And I was 6th grade. I was having to go to school through the shelter, through UTA bus, and like having to be put in the McKennedy-Vento program at school because I was homeless. So I was labeled as a homeless person at school. Some of the kids knew that, but some of the kids didn't. On my bus, I was the first person and last person to be picked up because the school didn't want the other kids to know that we were homeless because of the bullying. And a lot of the kids that I went on the bus with were all my friends from the shelter. And like some of them are still my friends to this day. Some of them I consider my brother or my siblings or family, just period. Like there's so many people I met living at the shelter. The first day, like I said, I was scared, but for 2 weeks I lived in what they called a dorm at the shelter, and it was like jail prison mats that are like this thin, and a bunk where you're in a room with like 50 to 60 people with babies and children and families that are homeless and are going through the same thing that I was with my family. And that sadness and that like struggle brought us all together. There's so many like families I met throughout there. I got lucky, more lucky than most people. I don't know if it was God, but there's a dorm and there's rooms. And I got to stay in the dorm for 2 weeks, less than most people. Maybe it was because I had a bigger family than most. But I got a room, and a room gave me the exception to have used to a fridge and an oven and a room where I could just share with my family, where I could be away from the others. But I still had to have certain kind of like checkouts and check-ins every now and then. And like there was a lot of things that happened throughout the shelter. I remember for Christmas one year, because I was there throughout Christmas a couple times. One Christmas, actually the radio stations came there to like interview us too. They came to like ask families questions about it. We were on like U92 and Mix 107.9, and they were set up right in there was an office in the shelter. They were set up right in the office. And I remember how generous people were when it was like the holidays and stuff like that. We'd stand outside where all the scary stuff was going on. People, drug addicts, running crazy, like really scary for the kids, to where they had to have security and people walking up and down the street to make sure that the kids and the families were all right. There was, in the shelter, there was a women's, men's, and a family section. And in the families, I hate it. And I always thought it was messed up throughout my childhood. They treated us, the families, a little bit better than the women's and men's. The women's and men's. Like, and even the women's a little bit better than men's. And I always thought that it was a little bit messed up. Actually, a lot messed up. They had to wait longer to get homes than we did, but I understand that because there's people with children, you know what I mean? They're kids like I was. And like throughout all that struggle, I don't take it back for 1 second. There's so many people that I met, so many things I learned that made me grow up. Like I'm 17 and I know so much things that like someone normal my age wouldn't even know. And the shelter did a lot for me, and they like found me a home. I did lose my housing and I still pretty much am homeless, but I'm living in a home is better than what it was. But I'll always remember the homeless shelter. They took it down.
The numbers are good. Crime in the area is down more than 40%. The number of treatment beds for addicts has doubled. But safety issues at some of the local shelters and the lack of affordable housing are still forcing others onto the street.
And once you fall into this hole, it's so hard to get out. You know, if people don't realize they're only, you know, a paycheck away from being in this position.
Holly Stites has been homeless for 3 years after losing her job. She says even with help like a housing voucher, there are still hurdles keeping people on the streets.
It's not just us getting a housing voucher, it's the landlords in the community also helping by accepting them, because a lot of places won't.
Police admit it has actually moved, and they're focusing the efforts now on those new locations.
A new report says Salt Lake City's homeless population suffers from long-term damage from Operation Rio Grande.
The scathing report comes from the American Civil Liberties Union of Utah. It examined the effectiveness of the high-profile campaign.
The report says that over the last 2 years, Operation Rio Grande criminalized homelessness, and that the number of arrests, the majority of them were for low-level offenses and not the worst of the worst as promised. Such as camping, public urination, and jaywalking. 64% of arrests in the first month, 70% 1 year later.
If you had a police officer out in front of your house or on your corner, basically 24/7 watching everything you did, chances are you're going to break the law.
The report asserts low-level offenders face even more barriers and have a more difficult time digging out from under fines and jail time while not getting the help more serious offenders receive.
Operation Rio Grande, because of the emphasis on law enforcement and using arrest, detention, and jail as the filter for delivering services, ended up creating a lot of collateral damage that months and years later we're still trying to resolve.
We tried every strategy we had in a law enforcement aspect, and frankly none of it really helped. It helped for a little while, but it would come back and it didn't really solve any problems. So what your police department has committed to is changing not only our tactic but our entire style. And so what we've done over 20 years is we've tried to arrest our way out, and that just has not worked. So what we've created is a social service parallel to the law enforcement effort. And like I said, the law enforcement effort certainly isn't going to go away. It's still needed. There are people down here that are selling drugs, that are engaging in violence, and they're preying on our most vulnerable population. And we have a method for that, and that's arrest and incarceration in jail.
And we have a method for that, and that's arrest and incarceration in jail.
We're here with Daniel Houston of the 2020 Band of Visionaries. Daniel is a musician, artist. You actually participated in the protest that took place recently, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
All right, for sure. What did you see, like, and what can you tell us about, like, what's been going on with the homelessness and the situations that's going on right now? Like, what's your side? Like, what can you tell us?
So we'll start with personal experience. Being there was very, like, I don't know, enlightening because of the fact that it opened me up to a lot of different perspectives, because I mean, just by popular demand, everybody's like, fuck the police.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? But being down there, especially for that night, gave me like the chance to see like the perspective of the city, the perspective of the police, the perspective of the activist group, and the perspective of the homeless people. So going back to what I said on the personal experience, like when I walked up, I came through Porsche or Larry H. Miller, that parking lot, and I walked, right up to this police officer that was, because they were setting up a perimeter around the initial situation that was happening in Washington Square.
Yeah.
And you know, we just kind of, as a group, we approached him and shit, and just kind of like talking to him, like, what's going on? How do you feel about the situation and everything? And we were having a decent conversation with him. One of the activist ladies and one of the activist dudes, you know what I'm saying, they came up and they started getting on him about, you know, like, you know, this is inhumane and stuff like that. And my personal experience, being homeless myself at one point,
for sure,
and then having friends and stuff like that, like, the activists got your back. They're very, like, accepting and very open people to your situation. The police are given a specific order by the city to keep order in a specific way. Some of them take their jurisdiction farther than they need to, and we all have had our own shit with the police. And then the city itself, you know, Salt Lake City and Utah, the state, like, also has to keep a certain ordinance and a certain imagery. And then the homeless people, you know what I mean? Like, they ain't got nowhere to go, man. It's cold outside.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
yeah, the other night we were out there, it was like below 30, man. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, so, see, the thing about it is like, so when I came up through the parking lot and we walked up on this cop and we talked to him, we asked him, because the first thing I asked him was like, how do you feel about it? Like, if that was your family, how would you feel about it, right?
Yeah.
And he says, well, I would tell my family to go to the road home. And like, there was this whole argument about, you know, there's open beds, there isn't, we called, stuff like that. And I can't even remember the one police officer's name, but he's standing right here to my left. I got it in my video. Standing right here to my left, and he was talking to like the crowd of us that were just asking him, you know, like, what's going on? How do you feel about the situation? What if that was your mom and your dad and your uncle or your brother, you know what I mean? And he's like, I tell them to go to the road home, but also at the same time, I would not just tell them, and this is where it kind of opened up my mind to like different types of police officers. Like, yeah, they all have one, you know what I mean, agenda,
for
whatever,
sure.
but
Yeah.
like, there is some cops that like, they see it for what it is. They just can't really do anything about it.
So, is this like, are you like stationed out here, like you're patrolling this area? Are you like patrolling this area?
Yeah, so we have patrol officers out here for 2 hours every, we do 2-hour rotations out here.
For sure, for sure. Like, what have you seen out? Like, this is where the protests happen, and then like the library's right here. The library tends to attract like a lot of homeless activity. What have you seen?
Since that happened, actually, it's been cleared out a lot.
For sure.
I'm not too sure where everyone went off to. I haven't really dealt with too much lately. But yeah, it's been pretty mellow out here.
Nice. How long have you been serving?
About a year now.
Oh, nice. What made you wanna join the police force?
My whole family's in law enforcement, so I kind of just grew up in it.
Oh, for sure. You got blue blood?
Yeah.
Is that what they call it? Is there anything else that you wanted to add? Like, give your side of the story or your perspective concerning this, what's going on?